Okay, thank you. Well, at 9:14, I'm calling the meeting to order, and we will have a Pledge of Allegiance. And whom do we have here meeting? Do we have Mr. Huber present?
Yes.
Yeah, would you please join us or start the Pledge of Allegiance? And I have a flag right behind me.
Yes, please rise and join me. Put your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Vice Chair Huber. And with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Kettle to announce that we have no public comments so far, I believe.
What we're going to do, Madam Chair, is first what we'll need to do is I want to make a very quick introduction. We will go to public comments here in a second, but we do need to do a roll call. And
we do, yes. I skipped that.
So we're good. So somewhere on, for those of you that are watching by video, in these tile of photos is our new clerk of the commission, Roxana Ibarra. Roxana, if you could just give us a little wave for those that have not met Roxana. Roxana's just joined us. Her first day was April 1st. We're trying to refrain from any April Fool's jokes, particularly right now, given how this meeting is going so far. Roxana is going to do our roll call. I did want to make sure that we thanked Vera Vega, who stood in as clerk of the commission for a couple of months while we were doing our recruitment. Roxana, as I said, she's joined us from Gold Coast Transit, where she'd been for 19 years in a variety of capacities, and we're happy to have her on board. So with that, Roxana is going to go through the roll call.
Commissioner Bennett?
Here.
Commissioner Berg?
Here.
Commissioner Walensky?
Here.
Commissioner Crosswhite?
Here.
Commissioner Haney?
Here.
Commissioner Heitman?
Here.
Commissioner Huber?
Here.
Commissioner Humphrey?
Here.
Commissioner Judge?
Present.
Commissioner Long?
Here.
Commissioner McDonald?
Here.
Commissioner Manhattan?
Here.
Commissioner Parks?
Here.
Commissioner Simons?
Present.
Commissioner Tremblay?
Here.
Commissioner White? Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Zaragoza?
Here.
Vice Chair Huber?
Here.
Chair Bill de la Peña?
Present. Good. So now we have everyone present, and we can now go to public comments.
Madam Chair, as was announced earlier, the public comment opportunity was to email in public comments to Vera Vega. As of yesterday afternoon, we've received no public comments, so there are none to read into the record. Should a public comment come in between now and the end of this meeting or anytime after this meeting that we need to include in the record, we will reflect that at our next commission meeting.
Very good. Thank you. We now move on to the Caltrans report, and Commissioner Bolin.
Okay, good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I certainly appreciate everybody attending this meeting through alternative methods. Obviously, we have a few kinks, but we can work those out. Just give you an update. I provide a project list to everybody. Hopefully that was sent out to you via email. I see Darren shaking his head. So I will not go over that unless you have specific questions related to that list. I do have a couple things that I just want to touch on. And these are primarily COVID related. Obviously, from what we all understand, transportation is vital. Transportation infrastructure is an essential function of government. Therefore, Caltrans is fully operational. We have changed the way that we are conducting business. We expect to have 90% of our district staff, office staff, performing work through telework means, starting on Monday 4th on April 6th. Currently, we have about 70% that are teleworking in some form or another. Our maintenance activities are continuing. We're fully staffed in maintenance and performing the work needed out there on the highways. Our construction projects are proceeding as planned. We do have a few contractors, and when I say a few, we have 17 contractors across the state who have requested suspension due to COVID for a variety of reasons. That's primarily personnel related or the inability to obtain the necessary materials. Some of those have made the request and then pulled the request because they were able to address the situation. We currently have 3 projects in District 7, and those are in LA County that are in suspension. And no projects are affected in Ventura County at this time. At the district office, we're public counters, public-facing counters. We have restricted access, not eliminated access, but restricted access. We'll be coming out with instructions on how to schedule appointments for anybody that needs to visit the district office. However, most of our operations should be able to be conducted through electronic submission. And that information and instructions are all on our website. Related to homeless encampment removals, we have continued to see increases in homeless encampments in the state right away. We have curtailed removal of those encampments for the time being through the COVID pandemic, with the exception of any encampment that is posing a safety risk. So I encourage anyone that identifies a homeless encampment to continue to report it. And if you, in your view, consider it a safety risk, please make sure that you state that in the request. And that's through the CSR process. That's the Caltrans service request through the website. We also are obviously experiencing lower volumes on our system, which are resulting in higher sustained speeds. So we are certainly monitoring that. We are preparing messages that we will be sending out to remind drivers the need to maintain speeds and the impact that speed can have on safety. So with that, that concludes my report, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Linsky. You did email, as you said, the report to everyone. And are there any other questions by fellow commissioners?
Yeah, this is Commissioner White. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here. I just want to get some information on what type of work pavement rehab means. Does that mean just adding slurry to the road or increasing maybe the slope for bicyclists? Or is it just making the road smoother? What does pavement rehab mean?
Okay, that has a variety of definitions, but it primarily means that we will be rehabilitating the entire structural section of a roadway. So the pavement and the base. Pavement rehab would also include making improvements to safety features that exist along the roadway, such as guardrail, signage, those type of elements that exist out there. So it's in essence refreshing the roadway system. It's not a slurry seal, which would be more of a pavement maintenance type of activity.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Also, I wanted to say that if at all possible, not to be on speakerphone. This way we will have better audio quality. Now moving on to number 6, which is the Executive Director's report and also Commissioners. Mr. Kettle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So at this point, I don't have an Executive Director's report. I am going to go into a little bit more of an explanation both during the, I was going to do it during the legislative update item, but I think I'm going to do it during the budget. It's going to relate to the CARES Act, the new federal act, and what it means for public transportation. So I will touch on that during the budget conversation, because it is all wrapped up into that. Otherwise, Madam Chair, I'm just happy to respond to questions from commissioners.
Okay, are there any questions from commissioners? Okay, doesn't appear so. All right, thank you. Then we will go to number 7. Mr. Kettle, are there any additions or revisions?
Madam Chair, there are no additions or revisions. When we get to the consent calendar, just an update on that. The minutes need to reflect under item number 12 that the motion was approved unanimously. We identified the mover and the seconder, but we did not indicate that the motion was unanimously approved, so that we need to reflect that. Otherwise, the rest of the consent calendar will be as presented. So there are no additions or revisions other than that one record-keeping item.
All right. You were cutting in and out for me audio-wise. I'm not sure if that was the same case for other commissioners. Let's see. So we are making a change to the minutes. Is that what you said?
That is correct. Just to clean up on the minutes under item 8A, under item 8A, the minutes for the last meeting need to reflect a change in item 12.
Do we need to vote on that?
Only when we do the consent calendar, Madam Chair.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to the consent calendar then. Are there any, that's item number 8. Are there any questions regarding any items?
Madam Chair, if there are no questions, I would move approval.
Long,
So
I'll
we have-
second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner McDonald, and a second, was this Commissioner Heitman or Long?
Parks, I
Heitman?
believe.
Parks. I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, Parks.
Long.
It was Long. Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Long then seconded it. I can't see everybody on my screen, so I apologize. All right, and then we will do a voice vote.
That is a roll call voice vote. So Roxana, please go ahead and call the roll.
Commissioner Bennett? Commissioner Berg?
Yes.
Commissioner Belinsky?
Non-voter.
Commissioner Crosswhite?
Yes.
Commissioner Haney? Commissioner Heitman?
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey?
Yes.
Commissioner Judge?
Yes.
Commissioner Long?
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald?
Yes.
Commissioner Manhattan?
Yes.
Commissioner Parks?
Yes.
Commissioner Simons? Commissioner Simons?
Yes, yes.
Commissioner Tremblay?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Commissioner Zaragoza?
Yes.
Vice Chair Huber?
Yes.
And Chair Bill de la Peña.
Yes. So consent calendar is approved. And we now move on to item number 9, which is our draft budget presentation.
Madam
And
Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Kettle. I thought this was going to be presented by Sally DeGeorge.
No. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, commissioners, for joining us, and we really appreciate your patience. Before you is the fiscal year 2020-21 draft budget. At this time, it's not moving. Oh,
So we're sharing our screen with you,
right.
commissioners.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
So at this time, there are a lot of unanswered questions with the new budget, given the current economic times. Darren, did you want to chime in at this point? Or
Yeah. So commissioners, under our administrative code, we're required to bring to you our draft fiscal year budget at our April meeting. And of course, as we launched into, as we started our budget process 2 or 3 months ago, we were it was a very different set of circumstances. And so while we'll be presenting this draft budget to you, just as we presented to our finance committee a week or so ago, clearly this budget is going to have to be reviewed further as we come forward with our June budget, the final budget for adoption, because there are so many unknowns at this point, given the circumstances that we're in. So as we walk through this is the budget as presented, but there are a lot of things we still do not know, and we will need to be evaluating that over the course of the next couple of months, particularly in light of, just one example, the CARES Act, the Federal Stimulus Act that was approved last week. So with that, I'm going to have Sally go ahead and continue in the budget, and I'll chime in here in a little bit.
Okay, thank you. So as this budget was prepared, the proposed draft budget contains $74.75 million in revenues, which is about $6.8 million lower than the fiscal year 19-20 budget. Just under a quarter of the budgeted revenues were federally sourced. Just under 3/4 of the budgeted revenues were state sources, with a small portion being local and other funds. As Darren did just mention, the budget was prepared under different economic conditions than the rapidly changing environment that we are in now. We don't yet have the new revenue projections, but we'll be adjusting the final budget accordingly once we have those, and as well, the executive director will be evaluating all of our expenditures. But right now, Darren's going to talk about the state of transportation funding.
I think everybody's familiar with the fact that we are in the last year of the FAST Act. That's the Federal Transportation Authorizing legislation. We are experiencing the fact that the Federal Highway Trust Fund remains solvent, but only barely. Our transportation formula funds have been a little bit higher, in spite of the fact that the nature of the Highway Trust Fund has been a little bit on thin ice, but continues to see added additional revenues. We haven't seen anything on an infrastructure proposal, but that is changing news right now, given the fact that we are talking about what's known as Stimulus 4, where Washington is talking about a major transportation infrastructure package. We'll see if what comes to light with that. The question regarding the bottom line, do not expect anything new from the federal government. I think that will show just how quickly things are changing, because we wrote this slide last week in advance of the Finance Committee, and then a matter of a couple days later, we ended up with the CARES Act. And the CARES Act, as everybody's familiar, was a substantial $2.2 trillion federal package. The number you see on your screen, it says 68 million. We have been able to get clearer numbers on that now, and we're up to $71 million to Ventura County for public transit for COVID-19 related transit costs. We were on a phone call just yesterday with the Federal Transit Administration, where they have let us know that in fact it's not going to be just COVID-19 response, but all transit related costs dating back to January 20th of this year. So there's a substantial amount of money that will be coming to the county for public transit purposes. Again, this is very new information that we're going to have to get in and crunch the numbers. I'm not going to say it's going to solve all of our challenges from a budgetary perspective, But, and that's just not, and I should say that is not just the Ventura County Transportation Commission. That is all transit operators in the county. So that includes the municipal operators as well as Gold Coast that will be able to receive funding from the CARES Act. So while we are going to, the next slide we move on to is dealing with state funding. That is far less certain than what we are seeing out of the CARES Act. Now, we're all familiar with SB1 and the fact that it's a fix-it-first program, and it's brought transportation dollars to all portions of the transportation system in the state. But there are going to be some questions about its revenue projections in the coming years, given the nature of the economic anticipated recession issues and other things. I'll very quickly touch on the three bills that we had been hearing about regarding free fares. There were a number of transit operators in the county that were that had been taking a look at this and what would it mean as it relates to the loss of fare revenue to ensure sustainability of our transit systems. We have heard that the committees that were looking at these bills have shelved them for the time being, and or at least our advocate, our lobbyist in Sacramento, in their communications, is that all the word is that these bills will be dropped because they just will not be a priority given what will be a very shortened legislative session this year. So we will need to see what happens as it relates to the state budget and some of our other funding sources. And that will, again, need to be reflected as we get into our final budget in June. And so those are the two elements I wanted to bring to the conversation, so you're aware of it. Sally's going to take on the next slide as it relates to some of our local revenues. Sally?
Thank you. So one of the largest funding sources of VCTC state revenues is from the Transportation Development Act, or TDA. And one source of that TDA is the Local Transportation Fund, which is the state quarter-cent sales tax revenue to Ventura County. The LTF revenues at this time are 51% of our draft budget. The projection from the county back in January was a 1.1 million increase to sales tax receipts, but we will be receiving a revised estimate from the county later this month, and that information will be reflected with a decreased estimate with the final budget, but we don't have a magnitude yet. Per this budget, VCTC's needs were approximately 400,000 higher than the previous fiscal year, due in part to the ADA certification process no longer being FTA eligible and funded with LTF funds. The two new positions that were supported in part by LTF funds, as well as new studies such as the Congestion Management Program and the Comprehensive Transportation Plan.
So if I could real quickly,
TDA,
Sally.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, Sally, if you could go back one time, just one slide again for us. So we had this conversation with the Finance Committee last week. This budget, as it was being presented, had two new positions. One of those positions is the position that the Commission approved a month or so ago that was a manager for government and community relations. The other was a new position in our programming department. I will be reevaluating one of those positions in particular, the programming department position. I do think it's going to be important to continue our government and community relations position as of now, but I will be needing to, like I say, continue to reevaluate that, just so you're aware of it. As it relates to the new studies, these are generally what it is this is the local funding that could match state funding. So if we get word that our grant that we applied for from Caltrans for the Comprehensive Transportation Plan is awarded, then I would hope that we would be able to move forward with an update to that plan. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that as we look at this, we're going to be evaluating as we get into the June final some of those items, because we will have more information.
Thank you. Oops, wrong way.
Could I ask a question on that? Mr. Kettle?
Yes,
as we look at our ridership tanking, And depending on how long this all lasts, I'm just wondering about the need for things like marketing and those kind of government relation things too, if what we're putting out there is about our buses.
Well, it's a very good question, and I think it's something that the entire industry is going to be wrestling with throughout the country, because we've all seen this precipitous drop in ridership. I think there's a strong feeling that once this is over, we want to encourage people to get back into public transit. We are going to have to probably really strengthen our efforts, because people will have gotten used to maybe not taking transit. And we want to make sure that whether it's ride sharing or transit, other mobility options besides the single occupant vehicle, why we want to try to really sort of step up our efforts to get people back into those systems. So that's the idea about what we'd be doing, particularly in that area. And I think it's a matter of us, when we look at some of just the nature of how we're communicating with the rest of the community, how we are elevating our game there. I think this is going to be one of those real difficult questions that we're just going to have to digest over the next couple months. Because things are happening so quickly, I want to be careful that we don't jump in real quick one way or the other. And so that's why I'm saying these are the things that I would want to be looking at over the next several months.
Thank you. And then also just thank you for the flexibility. I know as we are all grappling with this crisis, it's nice to know that we do have sometimes access to those buses if we need them too. So it is an important service. Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Supervisor Zaragoza.
Thank you for identifying yourself. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
I just want to share with you that the other day at the Gold Coast Transit meeting, one of the things that we mentioned to staff that we wanted to continue to convey to the public, especially individuals that don't have any automobiles and so forth, people that need to get to work and so forth, that we convey that message to them, that especially right now that the rides are free. And of course, you know, that the people can, when they ride the buses, they come in through the back door and so forth. And also to support the distancing protocol and guidelines. But I think it's important that we convey that information to the people that need to get to work, that according to the CDC and state and county guidelines, just for information.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kettle, was it?
Yeah, okay, so now we're going to go back to Mrs. DeGeorge.
All right, thank you. And I should have started with, please jump in since I can only see about 4 or 5 people on the screen. I can't see faces, and so I don't know if someone has a question. So please jump in as soon as you can if you do have a question.
Jump in right here that if you do want to jump in, if you could identify yourself. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So moving on to the second source of our TDA funds, which would be the state transit assistant revenues. These are derived from the state portion of the sales tax on diesel fuels. And the STA and state of good repair funds constitute about 3.4% of our budget, the draft budget. And these funds sustain the transit operations and transit capital projects within our county. Again, back in January, the state controller estimated that VCTC share of the state transit assistance funds would be $8.6 million, with the state of good repair funds to be about $1.3 million.
I can't hear her.
Is this Commissioner Huber? I can't see everybody. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Somebody having audio problems.
Yeah, I can just hear feedback from someone.
I wonder who that would be. Okay.
Okay. So
let's remind everybody. Thank you, Commissioner Parks. Let's remind everybody to mute their microphones.
Well, so we will likely not have a revision from the state for the STA and state of good repair funds We will be looking at, before our final budget, the next chance we have to see where the state is revising needs number 2 will be with the May revision with the governor's budget. So we will likely be looking at taking, reducing these amounts with a contingency, but Darren and I will have to discuss that further. With our personnel costs, VCTC employs a small but capable staff that provides support to the region. As mentioned earlier, the draft budget was prepared under a different economic environment. And as you can see by all the question marks on this page, that the executive director will be reevaluating multiple areas of the personnel assumptions used in the draft budget that may be changing with the final budget. When the draft budget was prepared, salaries and benefits were expected to be approximately $3.8 million or 4.7% of the budget. The draft budget contains 23 full-time positions. Again, this was an increase of about $614,000 from 1920. And this budget includes the 2 new positions that were mentioned earlier, the Manager of Government and Community Relations, as well as a Programming Analyst. And there are 3 budgeted positions that are fully burdened in these calculations. The 2 unfilled positions, the new positions, as well as the Clerk of the Board. Now that the Clerk of the Board has started, we will have known information that will be adjusted for the final, which will adjust the cost. And then as we evaluate those positions, there may be some adjustments. There was also approximately $70,000 for a merit pool and about $69,000 placeholder for a benefit adjustment that will be under evaluation with the executive director. Correspondingly, taxes went up about $74,000 with the changes to personnel, and those will be adjusted for any changes that are made. Insurance went up about $190,000, largely due to the 2 new positions, increases in costs, as well as demographic changes as we are having people retire that only had single or single plus 1 coverage. Sometimes we're hiring people that have family coverage, so it does change our insurance costs. We also have about a $25,000 increase to our OPEB costs. They were artificially low for about the last 4 or so years with CalPERS when they were adjusting their insurance premiums, but they are back to the normal costs now. Our pension was at 79.1% funded with an unfunded actuarial liability at $2.3 million. And our OPEB was funded at 79.8% with an unfunded liability of $352,000. As a reminder, we have been pre-funding since 2009, and as of December 2019, which is the last quarter I have data for, we had earned $644,000 in investment interest with an internal rate of return of 8.14%. Of course, due to the current economic environment and anticipated investment losses, we're expecting that the funding level will go down as the evaluations are done, as well as our liability will go up. I should also note that CalPERS valuation is about 2 years behind, so we do anticipate that with what's going on now that our annual rates will increase. Darren, did you want to chime in on this one?
No, I think you covered it very well, Sally. That's fine. Thank you.
Perfect. So moving on, although VCTC was originally a planning and funding agency, VCTC now implements and provides regional services to other agencies and the general public that we've divided into 3 categories. The first is our pass-through at 48% of the budget, or approximately $39.5 million. It consists of 2 budget tasks and provides a mechanism to receive as well as distribute funding to our local agencies. Our transit grant budget contains, at this time, $5.2 million for local agencies. We expect this number to increase with the final budget as we add in new pass-through projects, as well as the CARES funding. And then within the TDA administrative budget, this contains $34.2 million for local agencies, consisting of $33.7 million of LTF and a little over $500,000 of STA and state of good repair. And again, those numbers will be changing as we go through the final budget. The second area is the regional services at 43% or $35.4 million. It consists of 9 budget tasks and includes programs the agencies operate to provide centralized services and our cost efficiencies throughout our county. And finally, we have our third responsibility, which is the core and countywide services. It consists of 11 budget tasks and includes our day-to-day operations and activities that are outlined in our enabling legislation. Our budgeted expenditures are by program, and we have 6. They are the transit and transportation, our highways, rail, commuter assistance, planning and programming, and general government. At $82.5 million, it's approximately $10.6 million lower than the 1920 budget, but it is expected to change with the final budget as additional pass-through funding is added, as well as we review revenues and expenditures. To go into a little bit more detail by program, we have our transit and transportation program at $20.7 million, or 25% of the budget, and it contains 5 tasks. These tasks help the Commission to prioritize transportation projects to better serve our community. The major changes from 2019-2020 to 2021 are included within the Regional Transit Technology budget, a decrease at this time of $2.1 million for the completion of the Automated Vehicle Location Project. We are anticipating the Senior and Disabled Transportation Services budget to increase by approximately $154,000 for consultant services. At this time, the Transit Grant Administration budget is $1.5 million lower for completed pass-through projects because new projects have not yet been identified, but they will be added with the final budget, so this budget will definitely go up. Our Valley Express budget had a small increase of $69,000 for contractor costs. And then the VCTC Intercity budget had a decrease of about $4.2 million because in the current year, we purchased buses and we will finish that, and then it will be offset by depreciation expenses. Moving on to our highway programs at $5.9 million, or 7% of our budget. This consists of 2 tasks that are for capital and planning projects that VCTC implements, co-partners, and or oversees for our county. The major changes within the highway program management budget at this time is a $5.4 million decrease for partial completion of the US 101 preliminary engineering and environmental documents. We will be evaluating that number to see if there's going to be delays due to current status. Then within our motorist aid services budget, 2 things occurred. We've incorporated the speed info budget into this budget, and then it decreases about $230,000. As you recall, we had a one-time incident responder grant in 1920, but the one-time cost will be offset by some new freeway service patrol program, and that will be under evaluation as well, as there may be some delays. Our rail program is at $15.3 million, or 19% of the budget, and contains the 3 tasks listed, which encompass our rail programs within the county. The major change is due to the Metrolink budget, and it's an increase of $1.5 million for capital rehabilitation projects that are being carried over from the current year. Within our commuter assistant program at $650,000, or 1% of the budget, it consists of these 2 budgets and encourages residents to use alternative modes of transportations. There were only small increases to staffing costs within the 2 budgets. The largest program in our budget is the planning and programming program at $38.3 million, or 46% of the budget. It contains 5 budget tasks, and these budgets focus on comprehensive countywide transportation planning to improve transit and transportation within our county. There are a few major changes within the different budgets. Within the regional transit planning budget, it's a decrease of $117,000 for completion of consultant studies. The regional transportation planning budget increased about $453,000 as we anticipate doing the congestion management plan and comprehensive transportation plan. At this time, the TDA administration budget was increased by $1 million for additional pass-through to local agencies, but I will point out that we unfortunately expect this number to decrease after we get the projections from the county auditor controller. And then within the transportation programming and reporting task, there was an increase of about $105,000 for additional staff costs that included the new program analyst position that Darren mentioned earlier.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Mr. George, if I could just very quickly chime in here, just quickly. I do want to go back to the item regarding TDA administration, where we did see the plus $1 million. Sally touched on this, but I think it bears repeating. You know, that is a $34.4 million item in our budget. That is all. Some of that funding is for VCTC's managed administration, but most of that is passed through to public transit operators, specifically Gold Coast, our municipal operators, and in a couple of cases, when municipal operators don't have any transit needs, that is money that can go back to streets and roads. That is all sales tax measure money. It is the quarter-cent sales tax that is intended for first public transit and then other purposes after that. And I think you are probably all hearing about this concern from your local agencies that that sales tax revenues are expected to drop in light of the circumstances. So I did want to make sure that we make that very clear that is a likely issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, we have our general government program at 1.4 million, or 2% of the budget. It consists of the 3 budgets, and they administer and support our activities of the commission. The major change within this program is in the management administration budget task. With the draft budget, we were projecting a $400,000 decrease as office relocation expenditures we expected to be completed in this fiscal year. However, again, given the economic issues that we're facing, it is likely that some of the funds that were originally anticipated to be spent in this fiscal year will be carried over into next fiscal year. And finally, at the end of fiscal year 2020-2021, the $82.5 million balance budget leaves an estimated $16.8 million fund balance after reserve adjustments. Funds that are available for general use are only within the general fund, left an ending balance of approximately $59,000. Within our other funds that are restricted fund balances, the local transportation fund is just over $79,000. The state transit assistant fund would be $13.6 million. The service authority for freeway emergencies would be about $2.9 million. State of good repair would be $101,000. And the Santa Paula branch line would have a small balance of about $25,000. Our anticipated uses for the STA balance would be cash flow for delayed grants and capital purchases, Metrolink capital projects, VCTC intercity bus purchases, and sustaining transit activities during economic downturns. Our anticipated uses for the SAFE balance could be continuing the freeway service patrol, as well as in the future at additional incident responder grants. We do, as a final point with this budget, we do anticipate adjustments to the final budget as we reevaluate the revenues and expenditures due to all the recent changes due to the economic downturn as well as COVID-19. So we will get back with all of our staff, the executive director, look at these, but at this time we would like to answer any questions or take your comments about the budget. And thank you very much.
Thank
Madam
you,
Chair,
Sally, appreciate it. So are there any questions? And if so, would you please identify yourself first?
Supervisor Zaragoza.
Go ahead, please.
The question I have is, Darren, you know, are we looking at the potential impact of the CalPERS concerns? My understanding is that they, just in the last few weeks, there was several $1 billion that were lost because of the market, you know. And so my question is, what impacts and you probably mentioned it and I didn't listen, what impacts are they going to have on VCTC for a future budget?
So thank you, Commissioner Zaragoza. We have been thinking about that. I probably saw the same article that you saw regarding the investment revenues that have been lost by PERS. I think that is going to be something that we're going to have to be looking at as we go into the next year. Sally, correct me. Can you remind me as to when we might expect adjustments that we would have to go through at the commission to potentially make up for losses that happen at PERS?
Right. So if I may address that and add a couple more things. One, I will be on a webinar next week that CalPERS is putting on about this issue. But generally, there is a lag with the valuations that are done that are liabilities and our rates are. And there usually is about a 2-year lag. And that's for us in every CalPERS agency. So we will start seeing the effects of this in about 2 years. So we do have a little planning time. But I should note that a couple of things. One, this will be where things are in June 30th. So as turbulent and extreme as things are right now, we can hope that things will calm down. But in reality, it's going to be where we're at in June when the fiscal year closes that will be looked at. I should also point out, again, this is for all CalPERS agencies, that CalPERS takes a long-term funding look. So yes, 1 year downturn, and especially the extreme that could be anticipated, will definitely have an impact on us. But they do, it does get amortized over a few years. And it's not an immediate hit for everything at once. That said, I do anticipate our rates and our unfunded liabilities I mentioned earlier going up. I'm not even going to begin to project what that is. In the budget itself, there are some projections that were made by CalPERS before all this occurred. I hope to get more information on the webinar. Luckily, for better or for worse, VCTC is 2% at 60. So our volatility rate is less than those who have safety employees or who have more generous pension factors. And so although we will see an increase, it won't be quite as dramatic as some other agencies. But I think everybody will have to be looking at this and doing some long-term evaluation.
But it's a good time for planning if we have this 24 months to plan, you know, for that impact. It's going to be coming, because my understanding, I think, Darren, that they lost in a couple of weeks something like $60 billion, which was really a tremendous amount of money. But anyway, it's a good time for planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Zaragoza. Are there any other questions?
Madam Chair, Brian McDonald.
Go ahead.
I just want to compliment Mr. George, Mr. Kettle, Ms. Ibarra on this whole presentation and this whole meeting. I've been through more of these in the last 2 weeks than I have in my whole life. And this one, in my humble opinion, has been absolutely fantastic in spite of the few hiccups. So excellent work by everyone pulling this together, having it available for us to see, and kudos to all of your staff, Mr. Kettle.
Thank you,
Very
Commissioner.
good.
This is
Thank
Kelly
you.
Long. I have a question.
Go ahead.
On our budget for current budget, will there be any rollover? I know with the schools closing and the colleges not running, everyone learning from a distance. In Santa Paula, we had 30% of our kids use the bus system to get to school. Are we changing any of our routes or so forth since there isn't that usage? And if so, then is that going to roll over to this current budget? I'm just wondering. I heard a request of maybe decreasing the marketing, but I'm thinking we need to keep the marketing because we need people to know that our services are available, but we also need to modify a service that's not being used because of the recent changes. So I just wanted to hear some insight on that, because I hadn't heard that in the discussion yet. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you, Commissioner Long. So the big blue buses, we've actually reduced our service by in excess of 30% already in light of the ridership drop. Just so people have a point of reference right now, we're at somewhere between an 80 to 85% drop in our ridership on our big blue buses, and a pretty comparable number for the system out in the Santa Clara River Valley. So we have reduced our service by 30%. We've only maintained and generally gone to what is effectively a Saturday service for most of our routes. The one exception to that is the Coastal Express, which is the route between Ventura and Santa Barbara, where we've generally maintained our existing schedule, and because it's where we have still have a somewhat high level of ridership, and the fact that we have essential employees going to Santa Barbara County. I'll remind the commission that Santa Barbara contributes half the cost to that service, so they see the value in us keeping it operating and it's performing. Out in the Santa Clara River Valley, what we've done is we've also seen a reduction in service, mainly because we've seen a reduction in the calls for service. Most of our ridership out there is dial-a-ride, and what's happened is we've seen a big drop-off in dial-a-ride, but one of the things that we did do was to ensure the appropriate social distancing. We are only allowing one rider per trip on a dial-a-ride vehicle. Whereas in the past, if we had an opportunity to join trips, we'd have 2 or 3 people in a dial-a-ride vehicle. So we have seen our costs go down, but maybe not as much because we are actually having to give effectively, and it's one person, one ride. Revenues that we have left over will roll it over into the next fiscal year, and because that's just the way our grants work. So that revenue, if it's available at the end of the year, will roll over into the next fiscal year.
Okay, and then the other question is from EDC, they're stating that our unemployment is going to go from 3.4% right now to roughly 23-24%. And to me, with trying to get people to a doctor appointment for dialysis or just a lot of different things that we don't know about, I just want to make sure that we're nimble enough to be able to take care of those that will need the public transit. I know we're trying to keep people at home, but there are certain things that they still have to do. So I wanted to ask about that as well.
So Commissioner Long, and again, with our big blue buses, those are, both systems are there for essential trips. Both the big blue buses as well as the Valley Express in the Santa Clara River Valley. I think most of our transit systems throughout the county are making sure that whether it's there are several that have dropped their fixed route service either entirely or gone to a very, very small schedule, but most of them have kept a dial-a-ride service in place. Those are particularly for those trips for the seniors and the seniors and the disabled, so they do have access to public transit. Sometimes those schedules, they have to do a little bit more planning, but the essential trips still can be made. As far as I know, anywhere in the county, but certainly with the systems that we operate.
And so we have that on our website.
We have it, yes, ma'am. We actually have it both on our website. We link to all the other systems in the county, as well as our new VC Bus app, which has notices about how all systems are operating right now.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Zaragoza.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I know we have other Gold Coast Transit members here, but at Gold Coast Transit, we've gone to the Sunday schedule. And what that means that it just takes a little bit longer to get from trip to trip, but we have gone to the Sunday schedule because of drop in ridership. And again, in order to provide the service that people that don't have automobiles are required to do to get, and also to get to the doctors. But we went to the Sunday schedule for Gold Coast Transit.
Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Crosswhite.
Go ahead, please.
So I have 2 questions. One, has there been any talk with the drop in transit ridership? That means there might be more of a chance that folks don't meet their fare box. Has there been any talk about what impact that might have? And then I'll ask my other question.
Commissioner Crosswhite, the short answer is yes. The California Transportation Association, which is the statewide association, has put together a package of both statutory and regulatory requests, with fare box recovery being at the very top of that list. So everybody recognizes the nature of the situation there. I will add, however, that the CARES Act, the new federal package, the $71 million that will be coming to Ventura County, one of the stated purposes of that funding is to make up for the lost revenues that are not being realized through fares because of COVID-19. So I think we're going to see the revenues that help systems survive out of the CARES Act, and I believe it will get some level of relief out of the state of California for fare box recovery requirements as well.
And that segues into my other question was regarding the CARES Act. What do you think the timeline is for, like, will there be applications? You'll be putting out a process. What do you think that might look like, and what might our timeline be on that?
The intent of the Federal Transit Administration is to move quickly. The way that the process works is, the good news is that while in this case, Washington, the Congress and the administration used existing formulas. So we know now, it's already available, that we're going to see $71.836 million through our apportionment. That is kind of it's a sort of just a standard process that money flows to the various regions in the county or the systems in the county based on a couple of different factors. We have not yet heard when the money is going to be available. I think this is something that, again, as recently as yesterday, our staff was on a call with the Federal Transit Administration. So it's a bit of a moving target at this point. But the intent was clearly stated to get the money out there quickly. And again, it's going to date back to costs that are associated dating back to January 20th of this year. So it's not just sort of this March timeframe that we've all started to feel the pressure, but dating back 2 months prior. So as that becomes more available, I will be communicating that with the Commission, because I know it's going to be something that all of our systems are going to see the need for.
Okay. Any other questions? Doesn't appear so. Then this will this is just a
we should note. Sorry, Chair. Depena. This did have. We were supposed to conduct a public hearing. I should think we should at least note that we did not receive any comments.
Okay.
For this, so that we sort of open and close the public hearing, or Darren and Steve, you can chime in on how to do this with a Zoom, but I think we should at least note we did not receive any requests, and we maybe can confirm that we didn't receive any phone calls on this. Let me run out and check with Vera real quick.
Yeah, I did not announce it as a public hearing, and so I should have done that. But if there are no further questions from the public either, then I'm just going to wait for us. That was Sally who spoke, correct?
I'm sorry. Yes, that was Sally that spoke, and I confirmed.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I did confirm that we did not receive any phone calls with any comments or questions.
Great. So then I will close the public hearing and open it up for a roll call vote.
So, Madam Chair, this is just a receive and file item. So a vote isn't necessary. We will we take this input and we will just again start looking at how we move forward to June with our final budget. Great. Okay, and that is and filed. Thank you. Do we have a general counsel's report?
Madam Chair, I have nothing to report today.
Okay. Item number 11. Do we have an agency report? No.
Madam Chair, there were no agency reports from VCTC. I don't. My understanding is that the SCAG Regional Council and committees did not meet, partially due to the fact that you try to convene it. We think about our 17-member commissioner, 17-member board. SCAG's Regional Council is 72. Even more complicated than that. So I don't believe Mr. Judge, Commissioner Judge or Commissioner Parks would have a comment related to that. I don't think there have been any other agencies that have met in the intervening month.
Okay.
Correct, Madam Chair. This is Mike Judge from Simi Valley. SCAG is going to meet, I believe, on the 24th of April.
Okay, that's good to know. Very good. All right, we have no closed session. And with that, I will adjourn the VCTC meeting to 9 o'clock on Friday, May 1st. So please stay well at home, stay safe and strong.
Thank you, everybody.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Excellent
Very
work.
much.
Thank you. Sir.
Thank you.